What if I told you that being expelled from school could be the best thing that ever happened to you? It sounds crazy, right? But for Barron Trump, son of one of the most controversial figures in American politics, it was the catalyst for an extraordinary transformation. In this video, we'll take you on a journey that begins with a shocking expulsion and ends with a community forever changed. You'll witness how one teenager's fall from grace led to a rise in compassion, understanding, and social responsibility that no one saw coming. Are you ready to see how adversity can spark a revolution of kindness? The halls of Westchester Academy buzzed with the usual chatter of privileged youth. But for Barron Trump, this day would be anything but ordinary. As he strode confidently through the ornate corridors, his designer backpack slung casually over one shoulder, he had no inkling of the storm that was about to break over his meticulously crafted world. Barron's life at Westchester was the stuff of teenage dreams. Captain of the debate team, straight-A student, and recipient of the coveted Franklin Scholarship, he seemed destined for an Ivy League future. His classmates admired him, teachers praised him, and his future gleamed with promise. But as the intercom crackled to life, summoning him to the principal's office, the first cracks appeared in his perfect facade. The accusation hit him like a physical blow. "Cheating, Mr. Trump." Principal Hawthorne's voice was grave, her eyes scrutinizing him over the rim of her glasses. "We have evidence that you accessed unauthorized materials during last week's advanced placement exam." Barron's mind reeled. Confusion etched across his face. He stammered, trying to explain, but the words jumbled in his throat. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Barron's usually composed demeanor crumbled. He pleaded his innocence, his voice rising with desperation. "There must be some mistake," he insisted, his eyes darting between Principal Hawthorne and the stern-faced members of the school board. But their expressions remained impassive, unmoved by his protestations. The decision came down like a guillotine. "Expulsion," Principal Hawthorne announced, her voice echoing in the suddenly airless room. Barron felt the floor tilt beneath him, his carefully constructed world splintering around him. He opened his mouth to argue, to beg, but the finality in their eyes told him it was futile. As he stumbled out of the office, the weight of disappointment from his parents pressed down on him like a physical force. His mother's voice, usually so warm, now cold with disbelief. "How could you throw away everything like this?" His father's silence spoke volumes, more damning than any words could be. Barron's feet carried him through the school grounds one last time, each step feeling like a farewell to the life he'd known. The manicured lawns, the ivy-covered buildings, the familiar faces now turned away in judgment or pity. It all blurred together in a dizzying kaleidoscope of loss. The true irony of the situation, the cruel twist of fate that had upended Barron's life, was revealed only after the dust had settled. The unauthorized materials that had sparked his downfall, a cutting-edge graphing calculator, gifted to him by a tech mogul family friend, mistaken for a cheating device by an overzealous proctor, unfamiliar with the latest technology. A simple misunderstanding, born of privilege and innovation, had cost him everything. As Barron returned home, his future now a blank canvas of uncertainty, he felt adrift in a world he no longer recognized. The carefully laid plans, the expectations, the assumed trajectory of his life, all had vanished in the span of a single catastrophic day. For the first time in his young life, Barron Trump faced a future without a roadmap, a challenge that would test not just his resilience, but the very foundations of his identity. The incessant buzzing of Barron's phone felt like a cruel reminder of the life he'd lost. Messages poured in from former classmates, some offering sympathy, others thinly veiled curiosity, and a few with outright mockery. Each vibration chipped away at his already crumbling self-image. Unable to face the digital onslaught, Barron retreated into the sanctuary of his room, drawing the curtains tight against the outside world. Days blurred together as Barron avoided his family and any semblance of human contact. The opulent surroundings of his bedroom, once a source of comfort, now felt like a gilded cage. He could hear his parents' muffled arguments drifting up from downstairs, their voices rising and falling as they debated how to salvage the situation. The weight of their expectations and the family's reputation pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. In moments of weakness, Barron found himself scrolling through social media, watching as life continued without him. Photos of his former debate team celebrating a recent victory stung like salt in an open wound. Posts about college applications and bright futures made his stomach churn with anxiety. The world was moving on, leaving him behind in a haze of uncertainty and self-doubt. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his room, Barron caught sight of himself in the mirror. The face staring back at him was a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, with dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights and relentless worry. Something inside him broke. Tears welled up and spilled over, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His mother, sensing his distress, knocked softly on the door. "Barron? Sweetheart, can I come in?" Her voice, usually so assured, wavered with concern. Barron couldn't bring himself to answer, but she entered anyway, crossing the room to sit beside him on the bed. She reached out to touch his shoulder, but the gap between them felt insurmountable. Her words of comfort fell flat, unable to penetrate the fog of despair that surrounded him. As days turned into weeks, Barron's internal struggle intensified. He questioned everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the world. The carefully constructed identity he'd built, the successful student, the debate champion, the heir to a powerful legacy, lay in ruins around him. Who was he without these labels? What did he truly value? The answers eluded him, slipping away like smoke whenever he tried to grasp them. In the quiet hours of the night, Barron found himself revisiting memories of his life before the expulsion. He remembered the pressure to excel, the constant scrutiny, the unspoken expectations that came with his family name. For the first time, he wondered if that path had ever truly been his own choice. The realization was both terrifying and strangely liberating. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtains, Barron found himself drawn to the window, gazing out at the unfamiliar neighborhood beyond. For weeks he had retreated into the safety of his room, but today something stirred within him, a restlessness, a yearning for something. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew he needed to step outside. The streets were quieter than he expected, a stark contrast to the bustling avenues he was accustomed to. As he walked, hands shoved deep in his pockets, his eyes caught a flash of color on a nearby lamppost. A flyer, its edges curling in the breeze, advertised a local community center. "Open to all," it proclaimed in bold letters. Barron hesitated, his heart racing. Could he really walk into a place where no one knew him, where he wasn't defined by his last name or his recent fall from grace? Before he could talk himself out of it, his feet carried him to the address on the flyer. The building was nothing like the polished institutions he was used to. Its brick facade was weathered, the paint on the sign faded, but there was a warmth emanating from within that drew him closer. As he approached the entrance, a cacophony of voices and laughter spilled out, making him pause. Through the windows, he could see a diverse group of people, young and old, from various backgrounds, all engaged in different activities. Barron's hand hovered over the door handle, his breath catching in his throat. Just as he was about to turn away, the door swung open, nearly knocking him off balance. A young woman with vibrant curls and an infectious smile stood before him. "Hey there. Are you here for one of the programs?" she asked, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. For a moment, Barron was speechless. He waited for the flash of recognition, the widening of eyes that usually accompanied his introduction. But it never came. To her, he was just another face in the crowd. I'm not sure," he stammered. "I saw the flyer and thought I'd check it out." The woman's smile grew even wider. "Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Maria, one of the volunteers here. Why don't I show you around?" Before he could respond, she gently ushered him inside, launching into an animated description of the center's various programs. As they walked through the building, Barron's initial discomfort began to fade. He watched as elderly residents engaged in a lively discussion about classic literature, their wrinkled hands gesticulating passionately. In another room, a group of children huddled around a table, working on what appeared to be a science project, their faces scrunched in concentration. They paused at the entrance to a large, sunlit room where a group of teenagers were gathered around easels, paintbrushes in hand. One of them, a boy with glasses perched precariously on his nose, looked up and waved. "Hey, we could use another pair of hands over here if you're interested." Barron glanced at Maria, who gave him an encouraging nod. "Go on," she said softly. "Sometimes the best way to find yourself is by losing yourself in service to others." With trembling hands, Barron picked up a brush and joined the group. As he listened to their stories, shared in their laughter, and contributed to their project, something within him began to shift. For the first time in weeks, the weight of expectation and judgment lifted from his shoulders. Here, he wasn't Barron Trump, the fallen prodigy. He was just Barron, a boy with a paintbrush and a desire to connect. As Barron stepped into the bustling community center, the air hummed with a different kind of energy than he was accustomed to. Eager faces turned to greet him, and Maria, the volunteer coordinator, waved him over with a warm smile. "We're short-staffed in the tutoring program today," she explained, handing him a worn textbook. "Think you can help out?" Barron nodded, a mix of excitement and trepidation bubbling in his chest. He followed Maria to a small room where a young boy sat hunched over a math worksheet, frustration etched across his face. "This is Jamal," Maria introduced. "He could use some help with fractions." As Barron took a seat beside Jamal, he felt a sudden wave of uncertainty. How could he, someone who had always excelled effortlessly, relate to a student struggling with basic math? He cleared his throat and attempted to explain the concept, using the same methods his private tutors had employed. But Jamal's furrowed brow only deepened. "I don't get it," he muttered, pushing the paper away. "This is stupid. I'm never going to use this stuff anyway." Barron felt a pang of recognition. Hadn't he uttered similar words in the depths of his own recent despair? He paused, searching for a new approach. "Hey, Jamal," he said softly, "can I tell you something? A few weeks ago, I felt exactly the same way you do right now." Jamal looked up, surprised. "You did?" Barron nodded, sharing a carefully edited version of his recent struggles. As he spoke, he noticed Jamal's shoulders relaxing, his eyes growing curious. "So, how'd you get through it?" the boy asked. "I realized that sometimes we need to look at things differently," Barron replied. He glanced around the room, spotting a bowl of fruit on a nearby table. "Let's try something new. Forget the textbook for a minute." Using apples and oranges, Barron created a tangible representation of fractions. As Jamal divided the fruit into sections, his eyes lit up with understanding. "I get it now," he exclaimed, eagerly tackling the worksheet with renewed confidence. As the tutoring session progressed, Barron found himself engrossed in Jamal's progress. He barely noticed as other volunteers paused to observe, whispering among themselves about the newcomer's natural ability to connect with the students. By the end of the afternoon, Barron's perspective had shifted dramatically. He'd always viewed education as a means to an end, a path to prestige and success. But here, in this humble community center, he saw the transformative power of learning for its own sake. The joy on Jamal's face when he mastered a concept was more rewarding than any academic accolade Barron had ever received. As the weeks passed, Barron found himself drawn back to the center day after day. He worked with students from all walks of life, each with their own unique challenges and strengths. The more he volunteered, the more he questioned his previous notions of privilege and success. As Barron stepped into the community center that afternoon, a hushed tension hung in the air. The usual buzz of activity was muted, replaced by whispered conversations and worried glances. He caught snippets of phrases as he made his way through the hallway. Budget cuts, program closures. What will we do? The weight of these words settled on his shoulders, a stark contrast to the lightness he'd felt in recent weeks. Rounding the corner, he found Maria huddled with a group of staff members, their faces etched with concern. Barron hung back, not wanting to intrude, but unable to tear himself away. As the conversation unfolded, the gravity of the situation became clear. The center was facing severe budget cuts that threatened to shut down several crucial programs. The after-school tutoring sessions, the elderly care program, and the job skills workshop were all on the chopping block. Barron's mind raced as he processed this information. He thought of Jamal, the young boy who had finally grasped fractions after weeks of struggle. He pictured the elderly book club members, their eyes lighting up as they discussed their favorite novels. And he remembered the pride in the voices of those who had found employment through the center's workshops. The impact of these programs was immeasurable, touching lives in ways Barron was only beginning to understand. As the group dispersed, Maria noticed Barron standing nearby. She approached him, her usual warm smile replaced by a look of weary determination. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," she said softly. "We're doing everything we can to keep the doors open, but—" Her voice trailed off, the unspoken reality hanging between them. That night, Barron tossed and turned in his bed, unable to shake the image of the community center's doors closing for good. He thought about his own family's vast resources, the ease with which they could solve this problem. But it wasn't that simple. This wasn't just about money, it was about recognizing the value of a place that brought people together, that offered hope and opportunity to those who needed it most. As dawn broke, Barron made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He wouldn't just write a check or make a phone call. He would use his privilege, his connections, and his newfound understanding to make a real difference. With determination in his steps, he sought out his parents, ready to present a bold proposal that would not only save the community center, but transform it into a beacon of hope for the entire town. The council chambers buzzed with anticipation as Barron Trump, the unlikeliest of champions, stepped up to the podium. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, the weight of his proposal pressing down on his shoulders. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on the young man who had undergone such a dramatic transformation in recent months. Barron took a deep breath and began to outline his plan. He proposed allocating a significant portion of his family's resources to support underfunded schools throughout the town. His voice grew stronger as he delved into the details. New computer labs, updated textbooks, and specialized training for teachers. He spoke of establishing mentorship programs and after-school activities to keep students engaged and motivated. As he spoke, Barron could see the skepticism etched on the faces of several council members. One leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Trump," he began, his voice laced with doubt, "how can we be sure this isn't just a publicity stunt to rehabilitate your image?" Barron felt a surge of panic, but before he could respond, the doors at the back of the chamber burst open. A group of familiar faces from the community center filed in, led by Maria and Jamal. They took their seats quietly, but their presence filled Barron with renewed determination. Drawing strength from their support, Barron launched into an impassioned plea for equal educational opportunities. He shared stories of the students he'd worked with, their struggles and their potential. His voice cracked with emotion as he described the transformative power of education and the devastating consequences of neglect. "This isn't about me or my family," Barron declared, his eyes scanning the room. "It's about giving every child in this town the chance to reach their full potential. It's about building a community where success isn't determined by your zip code or your last name." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. As they began their deliberations, Barron retreated to sit with his supporters, his heart pounding in his chest. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the tension in the room palpable. Suddenly, a voice cut through the murmur of conversation. Principal Hawthorne, the very man who had expelled Barron months ago, stood up. "I've seen firsthand the dedication and growth of this young man," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. "If anyone can make this initiative succeed, it's Barron Trump." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. When the council president finally called for a vote, the result was unanimous. Barron's proposal was approved. In the weeks that followed, Barron threw himself into the work. He oversaw the installation of state-of-the-art computer labs in 3 underfunded schools. He worked with local businesses to establish internship programs for high school students. He even convinced several of his father's influential friends to fund scholarships for promising students who couldn't afford college. As Barron's initiative gained momentum, the ripples of change spread throughout the town. Local businesses, inspired by his dedication, began offering internships and job shadowing opportunities to high school students. The community center, once on the brink of closure, now bustled with activity as new resources poured in. Elderly book club members found their discussions enriched by fresh perspectives from young volunteers, while children like Jamal thrived under the guidance of dedicated tutors. But not everyone welcomed this transformation. Whispers of skepticism echoed through the halls of Barron's former school. Some questioned his sincerity, wondering if this was merely a ploy to rehabilitate his image. Others, still stinging from his sudden fall from grace, spread rumors about his true motivations. As Barron navigated the complexities of his new public role, he found himself at the center of a media storm. Reporters clamored for interviews, eager to uncover the story behind the Trump scion's unexpected turn towards philanthropy. Social media buzzed with conflicting opinions, from heartfelt praise to biting criticism. Amidst the chaos, Barron's phone lit up with messages from old friends. Some offered words of encouragement, applauding his efforts to make a difference. Others were less kind, accusing him of hypocrisy or seeking attention. Each message was a reminder of the life he'd left behind and the uncertain path that lay ahead. At home, the atmosphere shifted. His parents, initially skeptical of his new direction, began to witness the depth of his commitment. Dinner conversations, once dominated by talk of academic achievements and social connections, now revolved around community needs and social issues. Barron found himself explaining concepts like income inequality and educational disparities to his father, who listened with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. As word of Barron's work spread beyond the town's borders, an unexpected invitation arrived. The National Youth Leadership Conference, impressed by his initiative, asked him to deliver a keynote speech on the power of community engagement. As Barron prepared for the conference, he found himself reflecting on the whirlwind journey that had brought him to this point. Standing before the mirror in his room, Barron rehearsed his speech. The face that looked back at him was different from the one he'd seen months ago. There was a newfound confidence in his eyes, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. He thought about Jamal's triumphant grin when he finally understood fractions, about Maria's tireless dedication to the community center, about the elderly book club members who had welcomed him with open arms. The day of the conference arrived, marking a new chapter in Barron's life. As he stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding him, he took a deep breath. The audience before him represented a cross-section of America's youth, diverse, passionate, and eager for change. In that moment, Barron realized that his future plans had shifted dramatically. The Ivy League dreams and corporate aspirations that had once seemed so important now felt hollow in comparison to the work he'd been doing. Barron Trump stood at the podium, his heart racing as he gazed out at the sea of faces before him. The journey from his expulsion to this moment felt like a lifetime, each step fraught with uncertainty and self-discovery. As he began to speak, his voice trembled slightly, but gained strength with each word. "We all face moments that shake us to our core," he said, his eyes scanning the audience. "But it's in those moments that we have the chance to redefine ourselves." He shared his story, not as a tale of redemption, but as a testament to the power of community and service. The audience hung on his every word, their own experiences of struggle and triumph reflected in his narrative. As Barron neared the end of his speech, he leaned forward, his voice filled with passion. "Our greatest strength lies not in our individual achievements, but in our ability to lift each other up," he declared. "I challenge each of you to step outside your comfort zone, to see the world through the eyes of those different from you. For it's only when we truly see each other that we can begin to make a difference."